Okay, so we've all had those moments, right? Like you're stuck somewhere, an elevator maybe, or waiting for a meeting to start, and it's just silent, awkward silence.
The worst.
And you just want to say anything to break the tension.
Anything at all.
Well, get ready to become like a small talk pro. Because in this deep dive, we're talking about the secret weapon of smooth talkers everywhere talking about the weather.
And it's interesting how much we can actually say with just a few words about the weather.
Right.
You think about it, it seems so simple,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a really powerful social tool. I mean, we use it to be friendly, to share how we're feeling, even just to like set the stage before we get into more serious stuff.
Yeah, it's like this universal icebreaker that we all just get. But even when you know the basics, like how's the weather, there's a real art to it, to sounding like you're not reading from a textbook. You know?
Totally.
Mm.
And that's actually exactly what this deep dive is all about. We're going to break down an episode of Lemon Listen. It's this English learning podcast, and they're trying to help you not just learn about the weather, but how to chat about it like a native speaker would.
So in this episode, we've got Lenny and Lucy just catching up. And Lucy starts with a classic, have you seen the forecast? I know that seems almost too simple, but just hang with us here. This is where it gets interesting.
Yeah, this is where you see how the details make all the difference.
Exactly.
Because Lenny could just say, yeah, it's going to rain,
Right.
but he doesn't. He mentions his lemon trees. So he adds this nice little personal touch.
Yeah, it makes it more genuine.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden, we're not just talking about the weather anymore, right? We're getting a glimpse into their lives. We learned Lucy prefers sunshine relatable and that Lenny's probably going to have some amazing lemonade soon.
Right.
But what I think makes this episode so effective is that they use these common weather phrases, but they do it in a way that feels so natural and off the cuff.
Yeah, they're just like, it looks like rain. Or Lucy talks about digging out her sweaters. And for someone learning English, these might seem like nothing special, but those little phrases, they're full of cultural context.
And that's something that Lemon Listen does really well. They break down those everyday expressions that you might hear and kind of understand, but you don't know how to use them yourself.
For sure.
Like, they also point out the idiom under the weather, which, let's face it, makes no sense if you try to translate it word for word.
Oh, yeah. Trying to explain that to someone who's new to English, it's like, how do you even start?
It just doesn't work. It shows you how important it is to learn these expressions in context.
Absolutely.
It's like the difference between knowing what goes into a cake and actually getting to taste a delicious, fully baked cake.
Right. There's no comparison.
Speaking of deliciousness, though, we're about to get a behind-the-scenes look at the feedback that Lemon Listen got on this episode. It's like getting a peek inside where they make the magic happen and seeing how they take a good idea and make it great.
This is where we go from just hearing about the weather to actually understanding how to use it to have more interesting and memorable conversations.
Yeah, and let me tell you, this feedback is pure gold. One of the things they suggest is to use more specific words for weather, because it's easy to get stuck just saying hot or cold. But if you use words like overcast, humid, even chilly, like we heard Lenny use, it just adds so much more detail to your language.
It's like the difference between a simple drawing and a full-blown painting.
Yeah.
Suddenly, you're not just giving information, you're painting a picture with your words.
And that's what makes a conversation memorable, right? Vivid language. It makes people want to hear more. And speaking of memorable, the feedback also said they should add some like weather trivia.
Oh, I like that.
You know, like those little fun facts that you hear sometimes? Like, did you know it can actually rain fish in some parts of the world?
Okay, now that's a conversation starter. Totally unexpected, makes you curious.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly you're not just making small talk. You're sharing something kind of amazing.
Exactly. And it shows that you're paying attention to the world around you. It just opens up all these possibilities for keeping the conversation going. You know, you could talk about those crazy dust storms that they get in some places, or like the science behind those microclimates.
Yeah, and the cool thing is everyone's fascinated by weather.
Mm-hmm.
We all experience it. We've all been through those super hot summers or those days when the rain just wouldn't stop.
It's true. It's like we're all obsessed with the weather deep down, even if we don't get all the sciencey stuff. But this feedback goes beyond just using better language or trivia. They also brought up something really important, cultural differences.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something you don't always think about when you're learning a language. What might seem like just casual talk about the weather to you could mean something totally different in another culture.
Totally. Like, I was reading that in some cultures, you have to talk about the weather before you talk business. It's a way to connect with the other person before you get down to the serious stuff.
Whereas somewhere else, talking about the weather too much could seem like you're avoiding important stuff. Or even like you're kind of shallow.
Wow. So you're saying like even a simple comment about the weather could actually ruin a business deal depending on where you are.
It could. It just shows how important it is to be aware of cultural differences, even for small talk.
That's wild. So, okay, Lemon Listen has given us the tools to talk about the weather naturally, and the feedback showed us how to make it even more interesting and be aware of cultural stuff. But I'm really curious about the practice part of the episode.
Yeah, because it's one thing to hear these phrases and know what they mean. But to really remember them, you have to use them yourself.
It's like reading a recipe versus actually cooking the meal. You got to get your hands dirty, or in this case, get your tongue moving. So in this practice section, they actually tell people to think about the weather where they live.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, it makes it more personal and, relatable to your everyday life.
It's taking what you learned and making it your own.
Exactly. And it's so easy to get caught up in trying to say things the right way when you're learning a new language. But language is all about playing with it right, making it your own.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's when it gets fun, when you can be creative with it.
Exactly. It would be really cool, though? What if Lemon Listen took this practice idea even further? Like, they could have people call in from all over the world.
Oh, I like that.
And they could share how they talk about the weather in their own language.
That would be awesome. Hearing how someone in the desert describes a heat wave, or someone in the rainforest talks about the rain.
Right. And it's not just about the literal words, it's those unique expressions that each culture has. Like, where I'm from, we say fair to middling, which basically means the weather's okay, I guess.
I love that. It's so specific.
It is, but it gets the point across right. And can you imagine hearing how someone from another country would say the same thing? It's like the weather could connect us all. It's not just a shared experience, but something that brings our languages together, too.
Yeah, it reminds us that even though we speak different languages, we still look up at the same sky. We feel the same sun, and we all have our own way of talking about it.
I love that. So I guess the takeaway from this deep dive is don't just think of the weather as small talk. It can be a way to start really interesting conversations and connect with people.
For sure.
So next time you're about to make some comment about the rain, remember this deep dive. Remember those lemon trees. Remember it can rain fish. And those unique ways we all talk about the weather. Because underneath it all, it's not just about the weather itself. It's about our stories, our cultures, and those amazing connections we can make